I would love to make a new technical video about some exciting piece of camera equipment. 2020 seemed to blow its entire salary by releasing all of the new cameras. We saw the Sony A7S III, the Canon R5 and C70, the red KOMODO, etc., etc. 2021 is at a huge deficit. It's a dry year with no significant new camera releases. Since this channel has grown mostly due to its technical camera content, I don't have much to do right now. I'm still shooting, but it's stuff that I'm not sure you want to see. Like this video, for example. This is just me shooting with my R5 on a recent trip. I'm trying to make it interesting by showing some different cameras and things, but this probably isn't what you're really here for. I could make a video about the zcam Ip-Man S wireless transmitter, but CVP already made an exhaustive and probably better video than I could make. Go watch it if you're interested in that product. I'll link it down below. I'm still over here shooting with my zcam E2 F6 because it continues to impress me. I've owned it since December of 2019 and it's still a great camera. For a little while I got tangled up with the red KOMODO. The red code RAW was very enticing and the global shutter sounded good. But after my last shoot with my F6, I realized that the KOMODO just isn't as good. So while I'm still tempted to shoot with a KOMODO at one of my anime conventions, I'll be perfectly happy to keep using my F6, or maybe even my Canon R5. The video that you're watching right now was shot entirely with the Canon R5, and 95% of it in 8K RAW, and 100% of it with a cheap kit lens. Poor Tansen. Now I know, I don't need 8K, I don't need RAW, but I like it. And isn't that the point? When you don't make a living from it, this is just an expensive hobby for me, having fun is the priority. Oh, shit. That's partially why I've struggled to make some of my technical camera videos. I just don't enjoy it very much sometimes.
Ooh, this is cool looking.
If I'm really interested in a camera or monitor or whatever, then the video usually turns out better, or at least for me it's a little easier to make. And this is why I go shooting at conventions. It's just more fun. So once again, I took the Canon R5 out for a weekend trip to the Puget Sound. This time around, I visited Port Townsend. It has a nice historic downtown with a number of turn-of-the-century buildings. I have an appreciation of historic architecture, and one of the antique stores actually had a pretty good collection of vintage camera gear, which I totally failed to blog about. Of all the things I could have blogged for this channel, that would have been a good fit. It's nice being able to easily switch back and forth between video and stills. I thought it would be a good idea to compare them, so here we have some stills versus video shots. Obviously, the sensor can perform better in stills mode, but the 8K RAW video is pretty awesome. I've traveled quite a bit with my zcam E2 F6, and I would usually bring with me a tripod. My Yellowstone video is shot with that exact setup. I carried the camera and tripod all over the national parks, sometimes walking miles with that setup. It's a lot to carry around, and it can produce very different shots. Being tied to a tripod means everything is static, whereas with the R5, I can shoot handheld with very little shake. The in-body stabilization is excellent, and coupled with the stabilized lens, you almost can't tell it's handheld. I'm generally relying on the autofocus in the R5, although I do find that if you have a rather generic background like a sky or something like that, it just can't find the focus. It doesn't have anything to focus against. So often shooting these landscape shots, the focus will just totally be lost, and it might take a couple seconds before it comes back in and finds itself. I've actually mapped one of the buttons in the back to lock the focus, so I can actually just stop the autofocus, and then I'll grab that little focus ring in the front and try to rack the focus myself. It's a little hard to find focus on that thing. I am using the EVF quite often to do that, but even with that, it's hard to tell if something is in focus. And that's one of the biggest differences in shooting between a cinema camera rig like my F6 and the R5. With my F6, I'm completely manual focus. For one, my lenses are all manual focus on that camera. But also because the zcam has really poor autofocus. It does actually have autofocus, but it's just really slow. It hunts and it's not good. I wouldn't use it. But having manual focus, I get absolute control, and I'm using an EVF which has just really great clarity. It's really easy to see the image, and so I'm able to pull the focus and get really nice focus exactly where I want it. Whereas with the R5, it's using some intelligence. They've programmed into that thing, the ability to track faces and whatnot, but as far as when you're shooting something that's not faces, it doesn't really know what you want to focus on. So you can have all these different modes up in there that you can select from, but that's a little tedious, and I don't generally like digging into that kind of stuff. So I've set it into this mode where it's trying to find focus on the frame, but again, it just struggles sometimes and doesn't always get the thing that I want in focus. But again, I think you buy a camera like this because it has that autofocus, so you learn to live with it and learn how to use it to the best you can. And it lets you do things that, you know, I just would never be able to do with a cinema camera rig. I'm at another fort. This time it's called Fort Warden. Still more of these mystery batteries built around 1900. This one's, well, 1909. Like, why did they build these? Well, who were they defending against? I still haven't figured it out yet. I'm not going to go handheld with the cinema camera. It's still too heavy and large, and you know, it gathers more attention than I'd want it to. These forts are over 100 years old, and they never had guardrails here. And I can appreciate that they still don't have guardrails here, so if you're not responsible, you might fall to your death. So, you know, it's lessons learned. I'm not trying to be mean or facetious. I'm just saying there are consequences to your actions, and I think some people need to learn that. That's all. So I'm doing things with the R5 that I would just never do with my F6 or any other kind of cinema camera. And that's exactly what it's for. So if you want to travel and record yourself or just record where you're at, it just makes total sense to use a camera like the R5. And like I covered in my last video, you don't have to spend nearly $4,000 on a camera to do that. You can go out and buy a GoPro for, you know, $400 or $500 or whatever. You can just grab it and shoot the things that you're doing and cut that together and make something you can be proud of and you can share with other people. So I hope you enjoyed this little video. I know this is different again from my usual stuff. I'm not sure what the future holds exactly as far as camera gear. I am excited for 2022 because I believe zcam is going to have their E3 generation. I have no insider knowledge. I'm just guessing that they're going to be coming out with some new cameras sporting some new sensors, you know, whatever Sony has baked up. I'm sure Sony has some amazing sensors coming out in the future. But I'm imagining the zcam cameras having kind of all the features that people have requested over the past couple of years thrown into this new generation of camera. That would probably include like SDI, maybe a different media card, and you know, instead of CFast. I don't know. I'm just totally guessing here. Higher frame rates at higher resolutions, better low light performance, just all of those things thrown in there. And also, I think you'll see this from other companies, Canon and Sony, and you know, all the players will be doing this because the sensor technology just keeps getting better and better, and that's what makes these cameras better and better. I think one thing that's always going to separate a company like zcam from these other manufacturers is the autofocus or lack thereof. Same with Blackmagic. They just can't do autofocus, or they can't do it well. Even people who shoot cinema style stuff, they're looking for autofocus for some shoots. You know, for talking head stuff, interviews, that autofocus is really, really helpful tool. And so if they can work on that and somehow get that up to par, I mean, I know Red is doing that with their KOMODO. They have some pretty decent autofocus in there. It's not tracking, but if they can do those two things, get good, fast, responsive autofocus and tracking, that would really give them a leg up. It'd really help them out versus companies like Canon and Sony and so on. So as always, thanks for joining me. Drop your comments down below, and I'll see you in the next video.